Hi, everybody. I am Anna K. Jacobs. I'm the director of the New York Youth Symphony's musical theatre songwriting program. And I am so excited to have with me today, as part of our Artist Story series, the incredible musician, Lynne Shankel. Lynne, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited that we get to share this time together.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Lynne was actually a guest in one of our previous seasons of the MTS program. And I invited Lynne back today because she was one of the first mentors I ever had. I encountered Lynne on my first professional production, actually, of a musical called Pop. The poster's behind me. And she has always been a presence in my own professional life as this incredibly intelligent, creative, collaborative artist, and also one of the very few women I have encountered in my field, and therefore so important to me as a woman composer. And so that was my thinking on bringing Lynne on today, and why I think so many people are going to be interested to hear what Lynne has to say about her own journey and career. So Lynne, would you mind just introducing yourself a little bit to those who don't already know you?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lynne Shankel. We'll say I'm a former music director. Sometimes I call myself a recovering music director. I music directed shows you might have heard of, Altar Boys off Broadway, Crybaby on Broadway. I worked on the Raul Esparza revival of Company. I was the music supervisor for Allegiance on Broadway. What I really do most of the time these days is writing based. I do a lot of orchestrating and arranging and composing, and I also write some lyrics. As an orchestrator, I orchestrated Allegiance on Broadway. I also orchestrated Altar Boys along with Doug Kutsaros, and I work mostly on new musicals, and that's what I do.
So I know a lot of people who are part of the New York Youth Symphony community come from a classical background, and they may be wondering what all these different roles that you have or have had are. Can we start with music director?
Absolutely.
So what is the difference between a music director and a conductor?
And first, you know what? I want to say that my background is classical also. I was a classical pianist, and I went to school and got a piano performance degree. So that's where I come from also. The difference between a music director and a conductor, sometimes they're the same. Sometimes it's the same person. Sometimes it's not. The music director is in charge of teaching the music for the show and helping to make sure that the composer's vision is being realized, and also working with the director to make sure the director's vision is being realized. And sometimes that person also conducts the show. So that's the difference in the similarity.
And then you said music supervisor. How's
Yeah.
that different from a music director?
Well, again, sometimes it's the same. Sometimes there's only one person, but often I think these days, especially in the last, I think in the last 10 years, lots and lots of shows have music supervisors. And the thing that I enjoy and that I think is helpful about having music supervision is it's someone who can really oversee the project musically as a whole, and is often not conducting the show. So by not conducting the show and by being out front with the rest of the creative team, you really have a great ability to see the macro, the big stuff, and then also, the micro of what needs to happen, when changes are made. And The music supervisor also, helps to coordinate between the different facets of the music department, with the orchestrator, with the copyist, with the music contractor, and working with the whole creative team, all of the departments, and how they may overlap with things that are musical, and and again, watching out for the overall vision of the show.
I can definitely imagine why on a bigger production like Allegiance on Broadway, you would need somebody in that music supervisor capacity, because there were so many individuals involved in the music department.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think on bigger shows like that, I really do think that it's an important role, and
Right.
becoming more so in recent years.
So you mentioned that you come from a classical background, which is anybody who's heard Lynne play piano would know this right away. She has serious chops. And I'd love to talk a little bit about like how you began this journey, and how you found your way specifically to theater.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was a pianist first, and I played the piano since I was 5, and I grew up, studying classically. I also, sang in choirs like church, school, played for at every opportunity. Like I play. I also worked as an accompanist. I played for singers. I played for choir, and um, I think working with singers and playing for singers, and I think also singing myself, kind of naturally led me to be a bit curious about theater, and I started I started getting really interested in musical theater in junior high into high school. And when I was in high school, um, in the summertime, there was a community theater. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Kansas City, and there was a place called Theater in the Park that did shows all summer long. They did like 4 or 5 shows, and just like you do in community theater, we would rehearse at nights for like 6 weeks, and then you do like 2 weekends of shows. And our my high school orchestra teacher was conducting a chorus line, and she asked me if I would want to be the pianist for a chorus line, and I was so excited. Um, and so, and in that, they also needed in this community theater production, that the orchestra was conducted by one person, and then the vocal director was a different person. So I was in rehearsal with the vocal director, and so I got to kind of see what that was like. And it just so happened that there were quite a few times when that person had to miss rehearsal, and so I was kind of in charge, and I was 16, and I didn't really know anything, but I made my way through. But what I found in that is that, oh my gosh, this vocal directing, this music directing thing, I really dig this. This is fun, and it's something that I'm really really interested in. So I kept on that through high school, and when I went to college, I went to the University of Michigan, and I got a piano performance degree. But I knew like that I really wanted to be involved in theater, to keep being involved in theater. And what I didn't know when I went to Michigan was that they had a then budding, really wonderful new musical theater performance major, and they had this musical theater department that I didn't even know existed, because I went there, to study piano, and then I was just kind of swept away in all things musical theater, and I worked with their department and assisted people, and there were also all kinds of student organizations that self-produced musicals. So I got the opportunity to music direct and conduct shows, and I spent as much time doing that as I did working on my piano performance degree, sometimes to the chagrin of my professors, but it was my great love, and so I kept with it, and yeah, and that was school, and then after school, then I was like, oh, this is what I want to do, so I pursued it from there.
I would love to ask you about that because I feel like a lot of us have had or are anticipating having this experience of graduating from a program. We have all of this structure and you have this community. And like in your case, you were up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And then but your dream is to be in New York
Yes.
with a different community. So like how on earth did you make that leap, that scary leap?
Well, you know what? When I was a senior in college, a wonderful conductor who was also a Michigan grad and who is also now just a wonderful friend. The conductor Ben Whiteley came through conducting the national tour of Grand Hotel, and he was invited to come and do a lab, which was just like a like a 90-minute kind of discussion with the musical theater department, and so he came in to talk about what he was doing and talk about being on the road and Grand Hotel and being a conductor, so so everyone could learn, and I when I heard that he was coming, I went to that lab and I was obsessed, and I went up to Ben, afterwards as this, little 21-year-old person, and I basically said to him, I want to be you. How do I do that? What do I do? Where should I go? And he was kind enough to just give me some really great advice, and he said, the first thing you should do is do summer stock, and
Mm-hmm.
he helped me line up 2 auditions to be an assistant music director in 2 different summer stock companies. And the first one that I went to, I got it, and it was in Rhode Island at a place called Theater by the Sea, which still exists. And I went
Mm-hmm.
there, and I was the assistant music director for the summer. And then after that, they started a little touring company, and I went on the road with them for for a few months 1 year, and then a few months the next year, like conducting a tour. Like I conducted a tour of the Music Man and a tour of the Wizard of Oz, and frankly, like one job just kind of led to the next. The person who directed that tour of Music Man that I did was directing a very small off-Broadway revival of a show called Milk and Honey, which was Jerry Herman's first show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he asked me, the director asked me if I would music direct it. And so I said, yes, absolutely, 100%. And so I moved to New York to do that show. Now, that was like the only job that I had, but it was, that was my chance. And so I went to New York, and I found a little studio apartment, and I music directed that show, and it really came, like so many things spun off of that one job in summer stock. Like another director that I met that summer was directing a show at NYU right after I moved there, and he said, I need a music director. I said, I'm there, and I just took every job that was offered to me. I truly played for classes, I played for auditions, I did all kinds of things just so that I could meet people, and that
Right.
that's really the most important thing, because like I said, that so everything kind of came from that one job, and then I met these people, and that led to another job where I met these people,
Right.
and that's really kind of how careers are born.
Right. I think particularly in our industry that is so highly collaborative.
It's so highly collaborative, and I think people don't also realize how small it is. It's really it's a very small industry, and lots of people know each other, and
Mm-hmm.
and work with each other, or
Mm-hmm.
even now my colleagues will email me, or I'll email them saying, I need somebody for this job. I need I need I just lost a rehearsal pianist for the show. I need somebody. Is there somebody, young and smart who would want to dive into this? Things like that. And so we recommend people to each other. So it's also, I think, important just to remember how tight it is in these relationships that you want to, you want people to think positively of you. So I think you always have to just think about what you're doing and how you're behaving, and always treat people with respect as you would want to be treated, and that really goes a long way.
Right. Yes. And you exemplify that in the rehearsal room. I've seen that in action. I want to talk a little bit about how you found your way. So you were doing revivals, you were doing summer stock, you were doing tours. These were all well-known shows. But then you developed a reputation for helping to develop new work, which is really its own beast. And I would love to know more about how you found your way into that aspect of the musical theater industry and why it kept you there.
Oh, absolutely. I started working on new things. Like, it happened pretty quickly once I moved to New York, and some of it came even in the form of, like, I'd be playing auditions somewhere, and the music director would would like notice me, and meaning think that I was a good player, and then say, hey, I need an assistant. I'm doing a reading of this new show, blah blah blah. And so some of it was things like that. I also had a friend who I went to college with, who was a composer, and he let me work on his shows, and we worked together a lot in that, and it was really just bit by bit. But once I started working on new pieces, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. Like, that's the work that, for me personally, that I find rewarding. And it was a similar thing of one kind of leads to the next. She played great on this. You give her a chance on this, or I think she was my associate on this, and now I think she's really ready to music direct, and it just kind of spirals from there. But I think it also has to do with that. Once I started working on new work, I was really focusing that, and I wasn't taking so many jobs, doing summer stock, or doing doing pieces that were already in the catalog, because I really wanted to be someone who was focused more on new work and have people think about me in that way.
Right. And when you're looking at a score that has no existing recording, what is that like? Like, how do you find the right way in your mind to interpret a composer's work when it's never been interpreted before?
Oh, it's so exciting. Like, I love nothing more than, cracking open a score that, basically no one's ever seen before, and just to be like, what is this? And what is this going to be? And I think, often now, because I do a lot of arranging and orchestrating, I'm looking at a piece, and just I'm kind of thinking through it dramatically, and like, how does each piece function, each song function by itself dramatically, and then how does it function, say, within the act, dramatically, or how do all of the songs then work dramatically as a whole, and does that feel like there's a clear through line, and how
Right.
can I help to develop that, and help to to make sure that that it does feel solid, and that there aren't 55 ballads in a row that all sound the same, and things like that. So it feels like hopefully it feels like a full musical and dramatic experience.
Yes, and can you speak more about the arranging and orchestration work and um, how you came to that and how that's evolved?
Yeah, absolutely. I came to it, I guess I kind of fell into it. Like the arranging stuff, I kind of fell into because I was working on lots of new pieces, and then sometimes, I would be in the room with, the maybe there's a reading and the composer's there and the director's there and everybody's like, I think we need this to have a different feel. It doesn't feel right. And then I would just be like, well, maybe it's something like this, do 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 do, and I would just play something, and so those ideas, I started having those kind of ideas about how you could take something and kind of, make it into something a little bit different, or just
Mm,
keep the song is the song, but how can it work better dramatically,
right.
or musically, things like that, and things like, oh, this piece, it's right now it's just a solo vocal, but we need it to be a trio. Can you write some vocal arrangements? Yeah, sure.
Hmm.
And it kind of started like that, and I did a lot of I actually did a lot of arranging early on for cabaret shows,
Mm,
like at places like Don't Tell Mama in New York, where I spent seemingly years of my life when I was in my 20s. But it was great because I really cut my teeth on things, and I really cut my teeth on, on arranging and just starting, with orchestration, even just because you can't learn to orchestrate by orchestrating for 30 pieces. You have to
right.
start small. It's like, okay, it's piano, bass, and drums. What am I going to do with that? And what is that? So I think, just through some of those cabaret shows and early readings where I was, changing, with the blessing of the creative team, changing things that were on the page to be something else, or expanding things in different ways. I realized that was something that I really loved, and that was, kind of the beginning of me really, wanting to push more into the writing end of our business.
Right. And now you are, I feel like you are perhaps best known as an orchestrator. I know that you do like you said, you're a recovering music director, but
Yes.
you do far less of those duties now, and you very focused on your orchestrating work and also your work as a composer lyricist. I think it's so fascinating that you straddle different worlds and that you write a lot for pops orchestras, as well as for Broadway pits for shows. Where is your orchestration journey taking you? Like what jobs are you most excited by these days as an orchestrator?
I mean, oh boy, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm always I, I'm always excited about a new musical with a great score. I mean, that is something that is super exciting to me. I'm always excited when, there's I can find like an interesting, like we call like an in, meaning a road into a piece, in my head, coming into, oh, this instrumentation could work really well, and starting to
Mm.
kind of hear things for the first time.
Is that a conceptual process, Lynn?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that's, the first things that I think about when I'm going to orchestrate something, like orchestrate a new musical, are, you know, what is the world of this piece? What is the world of this piece, and what is the world of this piece, dramatically, and then what is the world of this piece sonically? Like what does it, is it something that is, first, is this something that is more, legit based, or is it something that really has a pop or a rock edge to it? And what can I do to bring different colors. It's kind of like what do I want to have in the crayon box for this show, and like what are going to be the primary colors that I'm going to use, and then what are all the other colors, little this, a little that make something really, really pop texturally.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing that the difference between hearing a composer's score just on piano and then hearing it for the first time in a sitz probe, and how much more dimension it has and how much more storytelling is in the notes.
Yeah.
What do you have? I want to leave a little time just to talk about your writing work, but as far as your orchestration work goes, have you got anything coming up if people want to keep an eye out on projects that you've been orchestrating? Is there anything that they should keep an ear and eye out for?
Yeah, there are a few things, with this crazy year and a half that we've had. There are some things that were supposed to happen last year that are
Right.
that are being rescheduled. I'm orchestrating a piece for there's a big dance festival at City Center every year called Fall for Dance. And this year we were supposed to do this last year, but now it's now. For the first time on Fall for Dance, it's usually modern dance, and for the first time, they're doing a piece of musical theater, and it's a collaboration with the Verdon Fosse legacy, Gwen Verdon and Bob Fosse, and I'm very excited about this piece. We're going to be recording it in September, and it'll be performed at City Center in October. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about a new piece by a composer that I've worked with before. Her name is Britta Johnson, and we're premiering a new piece of hers called Kelly versus Kelly. We're premiering that in Toronto, hopefully in the middle of next year. We were supposed to do it at the end of last year, and that's a really exciting piece. And there might be an announcement about a new piece that's coming off Broadway in New York, but it hasn't been announced yet. But I'm very
So people
excited
need to set
about
their
it.
Google alerts up so that with Lynne Shankel in quotation marks, so that they find out when it gets announced.
That's it, because it's going to be so exciting that day.
I should mention too that so much of your work has been captured in these beautiful recordings that are on Spotify and iTunes and whatnot. I know Allegiance has a wonderful cast album, and just to brag on behalf of Lynne, I believe she is the only woman orchestrator in the past 10 or more years to have had her orchestrations represented on Broadway. And Allegiance is the show where her orchestrations were presented on Broadway. Do I have that right, Lynne?
Yeah, sadly, like that's pretty much it. Like I was as it turns out, I didn't really know it at the time, but I was the first woman to orchestrate an original, like not a revival, but orchestrate an original show
Right.
on Broadway. And it also at the time, I mean, I was the only female orchestrator that had been on Broadway in the last 10 years. Like, going back to, it had been since Mary Mitchell Campbell did The Rebel of Company. And that was,
Right.
my goodness, that was 2006,
2008.
2007.
Oh,
I think
right.
I think it was 7, but
No, I think you're right.
so long,
You played in the show. I only
yeah,
watched it from the audience.
such a crazy long time, and it's just ridiculous, like that,
Yeah.
that there aren't more, that there aren't more female orchestrators working out there. I think there will be.
We were
I
just
think,
talking about this, that we do feel like that there has been a more recent sea change. There are more female identified artists, more artists of color being present in the pits as orchestrators, as music directors. What do you think is creating this shift?
well, I think that I think it's a lot of things. I think over the last few years, you know, people have become more and more aware of how homogenous creative teams have been
Mm-hmm.
in our industry. And I think it's also, and part of that, I think that it's like when I was starting out, as a music director, there were so few female music directors. Now there's quite a lot, but at the time there were so few, and I think it's that thing of when you don't see yourself represented. I
Yes.
think lots of young people, whether it's
Yes.
young women, young people of color, if you don't see yourself represented, you think that maybe it's not, a job for you. And I will say, early on, I mean, I had producers, question whether a woman could be a music director. Like in fact, like there a show that will remain nameless, a very well known Broadway producer poo-pooed me because his belief was that women were not equipped to be music directors at the time, and so it's like if that's the mindset of, oh, only certain people do this, then it makes everyone else think that that is true when it's not true. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
that everyone really is working hard now to make sure that creative teams represent all of us, represent the audience, represent, uh, just the amazing breadth of, of humanity. It's so important.
Right. Well, even though that would be an amazing note to leave this on, I don't want to, because I want to finish by talking a little bit about your composing and your writing, because I think what is fascinating is that it took you a while to decide to really establish yourself in that way.
True.
And uh, you are so talented, and that kind of blows my mind that it wasn't something that you started off with artistically. And I just want you to talk a little bit about that part of your artistry and what you're working on right now.
Absolutely. It actually was something that I was working on early on, and
Mm.
like when I was a teenager and in my early to mid 20s, I did a lot of writing, and then I kind of became swept up in the work that I was getting, which was,
Right.
which was as a music director, and then as an arranger. And so I just kind of veered in another direction. It never was really like, oh, I don't like that. It was just
Mm.
kind of, I was swept in different ways, and I was just, kind of following different paths. But I really got back to it when I was working on the revisal of Bear, which became Bear the Musical.
Right.
And I wrote new songs for that with John Hartmere, and that was, in 2012, and started to work on that in like 2010, and that was it. I was like, I can never stop again. And yeah, so since then, I put out an album. The album is called Bare Naked, and the front half of it are songs that John and I wrote for Bear, and the back half are songs of mine that I just wrote because. Um, and I'm working on a few pieces now. I'm working on an original show called Postcard American Town,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm writing music and lyrics for, and the book is by Crystal Skillman. And we're in the middle of a 2-year development process with San Diego State University.
Mm-hmm.
We've done 2 readings with them over Zoom in the last year, and I'm going out there to do finally a reading in person.
Yay!
Yay! In October, and then they're doing a full production next year in April, which I'm super, super excited about.
Mm.
And I'm writing 2 pieces that I'm writing music for, with lyrics by Sarah Cooper. One is called, it is a contemporary feminist adaptation of Helen of Troy, and it's called
Mm.
Hot. And
so clever. I love that.
I know, that's Sarah's title, and it's a good one. And the other one that I've been working on most recently is another piece with Sarah called Perpetual Sunshine and the Ghost Girls, and it is about the women who worked in the U.S. radium factory in the early 1920s. And yeah, and I just came back from the Rhinebeck Writers Retreat working on it, where Anna is headed in 2 weeks up to the Rhinebeck Writers.
1 week. I gotta pack my bags.
1 more week. Woo! Get ready. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I so appreciate you joining me today, Lynne. I just think you are such a fascinating person and such a testament to like how an artist can be so many things, and that you shouldn't limit yourself, but rather like figure out the things that you can do, even if it's just a little bit, and like just go at it, you know, just like when you were like, yes, I will teach the vocal parts for the summer stock rehearsal.
Exactly. Yes, I will do it, even though I didn't know exactly what I was doing at first.
You figured it out. That's the only way. It's really the only way.
Yes.
And I really encourage anybody who is not familiar with Lynne's work to go to her website or to check out her albums that are online. Her work is just incredible. You will love it. Thank you so much again, Lynne.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for having me.